Good afternoon, race fans, and welcome back to TITN for today's coverage of the HCCL Multiclass Championship Season 3, Round 5. As always, I'm Regan Clark. You join us here into the second half of the championship, reeling away from what was a fantastic midway marker at the Circuit Paul Ricard at the first 90-minute race of the season last week. And coming into February, you find us here at the Land Down Under, the site of one of the greatest circuits in, I would definitely say, the world, as you join us here from somewhat of a favourite of ours here on TRTN. It's gone by many names: the Mountain, Mount Panorama, or just simply Bathurst. This circuit is comprised of 6.2 kilometres, otherwise 3.8 miles, and 23 turns of FIA Grade 3. Home of the Bathurst 1000, all the way as far back as the times of the Australian Touring Car Championship. Nowadays, it is a centrepiece event of the Supercars Championship itinerary. Year in and year out, it has been on the ball every year since 1963. Elsewhere, its other major landmark event exists in the world of the Intercontinental GT Challenges Bathurst 12-hour that has ran since 1991. It was also the former home of the Australian Grand Prix on 4 separate occasions: 1938 in its opening year, 1947, 1952 and 1958. But more poignantly, it was the home of the Australian Motorcycle Grand Prix on and off from 1940 to 1988. This is nonetheless a formidable circuit, one that requires constant attention, constant focus, or you shall reap the indiscriminate wrath of the mountain itself. It is going to make for a fantastic race coming into today's event in the first race of the second half of Season 3. Previous winners, the last time we were here in Bathurst in HCCL's local history, it was back in Season 2 of the Multiclass. GT3 was won by Tyler Vermack, GT4 won by Christian LeBay. Taking a look into the championship standings then after round 4 of the championship, heading into today, starting things off in the GT3s. Mr. Scallops continues to lead the charge for Nissan, up and ahead of Dion Helgilian in second by 10 points. Anthony Valorio makes third in the Ferrari 488, as opposed to the 296s of the modern day. Stephen Sutton fourth place and Pascal Stoltz in fifth. Alexander Hivrich in sixth place, ahead of Giacomo Marianelli in seventh. Luca Tamburini makes 8th place on the grid ahead of Corey Aiken in 9th. Stephen Black to round out the top 10 with 27 points in the GT3 standings. Into the GT4s then, having a look at things and continuing his charge, much in the same stride as we've seen up in GT3, is Vladislav Mizin in GT4, 96 points, but this time up by a larger gap over Matthias de Munster in second. Zhemak Zulim for Aston Martin makes 3rd place ahead of Tom Wells with Ginetta, those two separated by only 3 points. Asahi Ota makes 5th place ahead of Marco Gaioliolo in 6th. Matthew Copsey in 7th with Dennis Gonzalez in 8th place. Andrew Canoro in 9th, and then rounding out the top 10, Odaras Castillo in 10th place with 23 points in the GT4 standings. Looking into those previous wins, the last round gave us quite a lot to talk about in terms of the race itself, but the results speak for themselves as it seems to be back onto business, same as what we got in round 2 as a matter of fact, with Mr. Scallops leading in GT3 and Vladislav Mizin winning in GT4, but not without great adversity, as we saw in that fantastic fight he shared with one other driver on the grid. We'll go to find them now as we have a little gander around, and that was Tom Wells. The plucky Ginetta went toe-to-toe with the mighty AMG. Ultimately, the Ukrainian picked up his 3rd victory this season, and it was so close for Ginetta's first ever victory at the hands of Tom Wells. Let's hope we can see another race like that coming in towards today. As we take a look with some of the drivers out on track at the moment, Antonio Cardoso, a driver that we saw not too long ago as it stood in the provisional opening runnings of things in the 3rd season of MSC. The then now defunct original first round was held at the Autodromo Nazionale di Monza. Cardoso won in that same AMG, albeit I believe it was the 111, not the 888, so new number for the Portuguese talent as he joins the HCCL grid for round 5. Taking a look at the balance of performance whilst we stay on board with Cardoso, starting things off in the topic of GT3, you find the balance of performance statistics highly favourite of Ferrari in today's round of the championship. The 488 and the 296, two of the lightest cars in circulation. Oh, that looked like trouble there for Cardoso, just on the run down towards Forest's elbow. So we'll cut back in with a different driver here. This is Zdeněk Julin. We'll be on to the subject of GT4 in a moment's time. But looking further through the GT3s, Lexus to lose 21 kilos, Porsche to lose 20, BMW to lose 16, and Lamborghini to lose 3. Aston Martin to gain 7, McLaren to gain 8, and Ford back onto the short end of the stick to gain 20. Looking into the GT4, balance of performance finds ourselves in a very similar predicament, but albeit this time for British manufacturers as opposed to just strictly Ferrari. McLaren, Aston Martin and Ginetta, in which we see their trouble for Zdeněk Julin on the run down through Skyline Hill, or Brock Skyline, sometimes also referred to as, find themselves the most favoured manufacturers on today's grid, but following very closely on their trails is Porsche. As for Mercedes, we see here with Matthias de Munster, they are quite conversely on the short end of the stick by a long distance, the only manufacturer to be gaining any modicum of weight on today's GT4 grid. That's going to make things rather difficult for the users of the Mercedes AMG, de Munster included, and if we are to see him today as well, the current GT4 championship leader of Vladislav Mizin, we do see a brand new driver on today's grid, one of several as we get over the course of the session itinerary. We'll be catching back on board with the 28 in just a moment's time to get introductions of these new drivers for round 5 underway in a moment's time. But taking a look today, the session itinerary, we're back onto the 60-minute races. So coming up after free practice, of which we're in the midst of at the moment, is 20 minutes of qualifying, first 10 minutes for GT3, last 10 minutes for GT4, and then on to a 60-minute race with one mandatory pit stop for fuel and tyres. So then, having a look with some of these new drivers on the field. We see this is Felix Kobler in the number 28 AMG, having some trouble there down at the Wall of Death, as it's sometimes referred to as. This is Dennis Damas, new driver on the grid for GT3. So across both categories, we're getting brand new drivers on the grid. Of course, we saw earlier was that of the Mercedes of Antonio Cardoso joining the grid from over on MSC. Having a look further around the field here, we see a brand new GT3 on our screens at the moment. And having a look here that reveals this one in particular, just as we pull up the data. This is Lorenzo Bucossi, the number 32. Joining us from the Ferrari 296, and probably the best time for him to do so, of course, as we spoke just earlier on the balance of performance, highly favouring Ferrari in GT3 today. The 296 and the 488 will both see great benefit from today's round. New GT4 then, McLaren's Fran Pinto in the number 62 joins us on today's grid. Oliver Swaver, we saw him last round, made his debut in Le Castellet. You see brand new paint scheme though from the number 119. Gotta say, interesting number to pick out there. Those who may or may not know. Brand new GT3 on the field there, Ami Zar, and the number 92 Porsche, making his way out onto the track here. So having a look at the session thus far to see what timings are concerned with. At the moment, we have 3 GT4s on the timing charts and 5 GT3s. So having a look here, Helge Lien leads the charge ahead of Giacomo Marianelli. Dennis Damas, new driver on the grid, currently 3rd ahead of Scallops in 4th. Current championship leader, I should mind, with GT3 and defending Season 2 champion. Then, of course, Lorenzo Bucossi in 5th place. In the GT4s, Matthias de Munster and Fran Pinto, the 2 fastest times at the moment, and Oliver Swaver tucks in behind. Currently, all drivers bar 2 out on track, and we've seen quite a continued series of troubles for drivers on their run down through that middle and final sector. Now, we'll try to catch on board with the driver just about to start their flying laps, and I do spy here the 51 about to start another flying lap. So let's go to catch on board with Giacomo Marianelli as he makes his way down through to turn 1, but it looks like there he's calling things quits on that run. So we'll go to quickly catch on board the 888. Antonio Cardoso then, 6th fastest in that last lap just gone. We'll stay on board then with the AMG as we take a breakdown of everything here at Bathurst. So we're already out through turn 1 at Hell Corner. This very sharp left-hand turn was named originally after there being a tree stump on the inside, and in the early days of motorcycle racing, if you clipped that, well, it was pretty clear where you were heading off to. The mountain straight brings us up towards turn 2 here at Griffin's Bend. Long sweeping right-hander, very odd corner geometry, and that only gets stranger on the run uphill in towards turn 3, 4, and 5 at the cutting. Super tight section, cuts back in on itself up towards Quarry Corner, turn 6. Out through turn 6, then now on the run through to turn 7 and 8. As we head up through Reed Park, then through to Frog Hollow at turns 9. Then through Solman, into McPhillamy, just past the Wall of Death. Through McPhillamy Park, down through turn 10. Now on the run down towards turns 11, 12 and 13 at Skyline, sometimes also called Skyline Hill, sometimes also called Brock Skyline after Peter Brock, famous Australian touring car driver. Down through the S's and the Dipper. Down through turn 17, in towards turn 18 at Forest's Elbow. Out through turn 19, on the run down the Conrod Straight, the longer of the two straightaway sections here in Bathurst, 1.9 kilometres of FIA Grade 3. This will allow the cars to really spread their wings and fly in the forthcoming race. Heading down in towards turn 20 and 21, down at the Chase, sometimes also called the Caltex Chase. So you loop back in on itself there, turn 22, down towards Murray's Corner, turn 23, to bring us down towards the line here on this current lap by Antonio Cardoso. And in that time, the Portuguese talent's up 1.3 seconds as he crawls to the line here and stays only in 6th place. Now, that does beg the question, what on earth was going on up in front to show that even in spite of 1.3 seconds worth of an improvement, he's still in 6th. As we can see there, still the two fastest times of the session, Dion Helgelian and Giacomo Marianelli. A curious ensemble of times so far then for that of Mr. Scallops. Perhaps some early doors sandbagging for the Nissan. And this is a place where the Nissan has got quite a lot of history, of course. The GTR used to be the Skyline GTR, and in the Group A era of the Australian Touring Car Championship often found tracks like Bathurst to be its stomping grounds. The R32 Skyline absolutely dominated in the Australian Touring Car Championship's 1990s Group A era. Down towards the line, Mr. Scallops only 5th fastest, so has it lost its edge after years of dominance? Only time will tell then. Helgelian fastest, Marianelli 2nd fastest. We saw recently onto the charts there, Stephen Sutton 3rd fastest to make a Ford 1, 3 and 4 inside of that top 5 with the new driver Dennis Damas in 4th place. Mr. Scallops then rounds out that top 5. Lorenzo Bucossi in 6th place ahead of Antonio Cardoso in 7th. Then on to the GT4 as we see here that at the moment Matthias de Munster fastest with Mercedes up the road from Zdemak Zulem in 2nd in division, 9th overall. Tom Wells makes the podium, but in overall that's 10th place. We see there and Anthony Valorio across the line with Ferrari. Now you would have expected under BOP today. Now, of course, we saw that the 296 is reveling in some great results already, courtesy of Giacomo Marianelli, but you would have expected, having actually lost more weight than its younger brother, the 296, that the 488 would be a tad more competitive. Now, albeit we can see here, this does appear to be somewhat of a fluke time for Valorio. 4.3 seconds doesn't really seem like the kind of ballpark the 41 hits for on a routine basis. This is a bit of a oddball result. With about 5 minutes left to go in free practice, could still very well be the case that he's, like Mr. Scallops, sandbagging and testing actual racing load setups. We see in the background there, trouble as clipping the wall out past the cuttings. Zdemak Zulem in the number 91. We do see joining the session now, leaving the pits around the same time as that of Felix Kobler. That is Vladislav Mizin. Hunting down race win number 4 then, perhaps today, or could it be race win number 2 for Matthias de Munster? Of course, Mercedes-AMG has dominated in GT4 in an absence of mainline domination from Chevrolet last season, courtesy of Christian Lebay. You see there, trouble into the wall for Matthias de Munster, and that looks to put an early stop to his free practice endeavours. In the meantime, Stephen Sutton goes fastest ahead of Dion Helgelian by 5 thousandths of a second. Nearest to the line then, the 41. Anthony Valorio on his way down the Conrod Straight here. Very unique note then from that 488. what was effectively Ferrari's last V8 racing car. The 296, of course, runs off a V6 engine. Down towards the line goes Valorio. Stays 8th fastest, definitely does reduce some of that gap, splits it down to 2.4 seconds, but it is definitely a bit of a confusing sight then for the 41, where signs would have pointed in the direction that the 488, especially under today's BOP, like the 296, would have revelled in much better times. It seems that something just isn't clicking over the course of free practice. Again, all of this speculative. It could very well be the case, like the 394 has done in the past, or for that matter, like the number 2 has done in the past, where it has been sandbagging during free practice, leaving a lot of its potential up towards the qualifying session to follow. 20 minutes, of course, and that'll be split down the middle. We saw across the line then Damas, 4th fastest in the session. Cardoso, 7th fastest. We see the number 2 about to start a flying lap here, right at the trailing end of free practice. Now, as he does that, let's remind ourselves of what's coming up in towards qualifying today. Of course, first 10 minutes go over to the GT3s, last 10 minutes over to the GT4s here at round 5 of the championship, and then 60 minutes of racing to follow with 1 mandatory pit stop. So on board with Vladislav Mizin as he starts his flying lap. We'll leave you on board with the Ukrainian talent, 3-time race winner this season, and was a real force to be reckoned with over the course of the HCCL GT4 Challenge. Let's go to catch on board here with the Mercedes of, if we can find him, that is Vladislav Mizin, and we'll be back with you in just a moment's time. So far, so good then for Vladislav Mizin. An impressive opening flying lap from the number 2 as he makes his way down the Conrod straight in towards the chase. In the meantime, up in front of him, the number 91, Zdeněk Žulim, with Aston Martin, about to make their way down towards the line. In front of them as well, Oliver Swaver and the number 119 McLaren 570S. But we've been staying on board here with the number 2 because better late than never, with about 40-odd seconds left to go then in free practice. Before we get on to the topic of that qualifying session to follow, down towards the line then goes Mizin. Where does he place himself amongst his contemporaries? Absolutely far and away in first place there by looking at it. That is about 749 thousandths of a second. 7 tenths, 409 thousandths. Very, very impressive right off the bat there. Again, looking at the principles here of a Mercedes 1-2. But I want to point out, Aston Martin has been on the ball on the run through free practice so far. Not to count out Ginetta as well, having just gone 4th fastest in division. Tom Wells splits the tide there between Žulim and Ota, the 2 Aston Martins inside of the top 5 for GT4 at this time. Meanwhile, things still absolutely razor thin up at the forefront of GT3, with Sutton and Helge Leon separate by only 5 thousandths of a second. Now, it does raise plenty of question here in what looks to be a slightly more troublesome venue for the 394, a car that has dominated GT3 throughout this season. It raises the question here, are we about to see, reflecting upon what has been the last 4 rounds here that has been won only in one time by Ford, are we about to see potentially the rise of another Ford victory, or perhaps even they're looking at the progress of Giacomo Marianelli? Are we on for a potential Ferrari victory bid? Only time will tell us different. Of course, qualifying to get underway in a moment's time. We also saw at the end of the session, dead level for times there, Mr. Scallops and newcomer Dennis Damas. 418 thousandths exactly between the pair, away from the fastest time of the session thus far. Mizin still out on track, but we're going to catch on board with a 91 in a moment's time here. Zdeněk Žulim, third fastest at this time. Still looking for a chance here to strike up at the front row of GT4. Admittedly, this is just in free practice, so we've still got the bulk of that qualifying session to come up to really start to thin out positions in amongst both grids of today's field. Down across the line, though, did make an improvement over it, but still off by 0.7 of a second to second place. We saw an extension up over the fastest time not too long ago. But as we see here down towards the line, it's even more on top of that for Vladislav Mizhin. Wasted absolutely no time getting himself to the front of that field. We see into the pits goes Oliver Swaver. Number 813 coming down towards the line as well. That appears to be Luca Tamburini with Porsche. Following on his trails, the number 12, Tom Wells. Tamburini 9th fastest at the end of the session. Wells down towards the line, and we'll have a look at the times they brought in at the end of that session.
Green light. Go, go, go.
And on we go then to the start of qualifying. First among the fray then for the first 10 minutes is GT3. Then the GT4s get to come out and play for the last 10 minutes. But as we wait for the grid to make their way out onto the track, let's have a look then at free practice and see where did Wells end up placing. Well, as we saw that he was the last driver to cross the line, but stayed in Division 4th place. So, getting on board with the leading GT3s. We see them already having made their way out on track, but leading that charge right off and away. The number 394 of Mr. Scallops will stay on board then with the Nissan as we tour the track once again. Now, many a question was raised over the course of that free practice session from the data we had to play with, and it raises the question still, can Nissan go toe-to-toe with Ford here? I mean, we're talking about one of the greatest manufacturers to ever take to Bathurst going up against one of the current greatest manufacturers to still take to Bathurst. Ford, of course, makes routine visits here under the veil of the Supercars Championship. That 7th gen Mustang, not only is it a fantastic GT3 car, it is also a fantastic supercar. As for the GTR, well, it's a descendant. It's no longer a Skyline itself. It lost that name in 2007. This model, the 2018 iteration, was amongst the last significant changes to the GTR ethos before they continued to just release facelifts to the car until 2024 and discontinued the model. Nonetheless, the Nissan GTR still serves as a revolutionary footnote in the history of the supercar. I'm not talking about the Australian Supercar Series. No, I'm talking about the supercar in general. This completely redefined what comprises the makings of a supercar. This was a god-killer vehicle on its debut back in 2007. It sent a chill down the spine of European manufacturers like Lamborghini, like Ferrari, knowing that their element of performance was being challenged by a manufacturer who could make a vehicle at a fraction of the cost and still go as fast. This could do 0 to 60 in about 2.8, 2.9 seconds. For reference, that's the same as of a Murcielago of the same time. So it's definitely quite an ambitious vehicle. Of course, now the supercar industry is rife with a numbers game, and the GTR, humble as it may be, just couldn't keep pace. Nissan didn't want to distract from what made the GTR a good car by inflating power statistics to be on an obnoxious level, like most manufacturers would be content to do today. So it's almost befitting then that a car like the GTR was a product of its time and little more. We see here, still over the course of this first flying lap, it looks to be a raring start here for the 394 of Mr. Scallops. He has not wasted any time here, trailing away from a less than ideal result in free practice, but now he really gets to kick some of the weights off and let that car sing. And on its way down towards Forest's Elbow, it has got every opportunity to do so down the 1.9 kilometers of back straight set to follow here. Onto the Conrod we go out through turn 19. That heavy braking zone is definitely going to find itself the center of some action over the course of today. Of course, two grids going head to head on their way down through that section. The chase down through to Murray's Corner. It looks like a very exemplary start there for the 394. So making his way down towards the line. The first time of today, 2:03.252 by Mr. Scallops. Next to the line then, Stephen Sutton. And then we can see in the background there, Dennis Damas. Two forwards to the line, the number 7 and the number 33. Fastest then by 1.1 seconds is Sutton. Then Damas third, off by 0.2. The 41 across the line, Anthony Valorio fourth. Then from behind them, the number 45 of Dion Helgilian. Predicted towards the front, and not disappointing on his first result there. Front row by 133 thousandths of a second. Stephen Sutton leading this session, though, by a landslide on the first flurry of times for GT3. 5 minutes left to go then before we get the GT4s out. And still with a few drivers left to see times on the chart. Among them, Luca Tamburini, who we just see to the line there for 6th. Giacomo Marianelli currently down the Conrod on his way towards the chase to put the 51 onto the timing charts. Cardoso currently on his way in through Solomon and McPhillamy down towards Skyline in the AMG. Before we see him down towards the line, we'll see Giacomo Marianelli down through Murray's Corner. Now, bear in mind, Ferrari on the bookings here for really solid performance under BOP. Sadly, under that last lap was invalid, so Marianelli will have one more opportunity. Or perhaps two, perhaps had to squeeze 3 there before the GT4s get to come out and play. 888 on its way down the Conrod straight at the moment. Antonio Cardoso. And trailing him, the 394, Mr. Scallops, still third in the session. So, again, nothing to scoff at here in the opening flurry of qualifying times. The Nissan does definitely seem to be struggling. It's not particularly on brand as what we've been seeing so far for Mr. Scallops. This seems to be a track where maybe not all of the parts are moving in the same direction here for the Nissan. So down towards the line, we see Antonio Cardoso 6th fastest, and then from behind him, Mr. Scallops. Is there the signs of improvement? Yes, there is, by quite some way. 0.8 of an improvement, but still remains in 3rd. The number 32 from behind him was Lorenzo Bucossi across the line. We see an improvement by quite the way there for Stephen Sutton. Number 41 coming to the line, Anthony Valorio from 5th on the grid at the moment, stays there. And then from behind him, the number 45, Dion Helgilian from 2nd. And makes, by looks of it there, that was about 35 thousandths of a second worth of an improvement from what was a 265 thousandth of a second gap to 230. Nearest to the line then, number 92. This is one of the new drivers on the grid we mentioned from earlier on. This is Ami Zar on his way down the Conrod here with Porsche. One of 2 Porsches on the GT3 field today. The other being Luca Tamburini in the 813. See then for Zar, making his way in towards the chase here. Turns 21 and 22. Or 20, 21 and 22 if we want to be specific. Down towards turn 23. Looking to put his first time onto the charts here. Better late than never in this case, because he'll only really have one more opportunity after this to put another time onto the charts. Down towards the line, the 92. By looks of it, as he crosses the line there, he will need that extra opportunity. From behind him at this time, that was the 51. We saw for Giacomo Marianelli up to 4th place now for Ferrari. The 813 coming to the line next, Luca Tamburini. Then further down the line, we've got Cardoso and Scallops on their way to the line. And by looks of it there, they will both have enough time left in the session to do one more flying lap we see here with Antonio Cardoso. In the background, though, was a big step out through the chase for Mr. Scallops. So it is definitely a case here that it's more the machine, not the man, that's having trouble. I have no doubts in my mind that Scallops could tackle a track like this. I don't think this would be his kryptonite. It just wouldn't seem on brand. Down towards the line. Of course, no improvement to have been cited there. Meanwhile, for the 32, Lorenzo Bucossi on his first qualifying session puts himself in 7th place at the moment on the 4th row alongside fellow new driver Antonio Cardoso. Just tucked in behind Valorio, though. It's a bit of a spread for Ferrari. It has been quite a curious case. You'd think under BOP today, they would have a pretty far and away advantage, but no, it is really in Ford's court to play here. It's a 1-2 at the moment. We see careening off track was Dion Helgilian, now fastest in the session by 208 thousandths over Stephen Sutton right at the end of the GT3 qualifying. Nearest to the line then, catching on board with the 51, Giacomo Marianelli. Looking to break a line in towards that front row. He's on the second row at this time, separate by 0.3 of a second thereabouts to Mr. Scallops. Just a little under 0.3 actually as it stands. It's about 272, I should say, ish. Thousandths of a second, a bit of an approximation. We see then down towards turn 23, Marianelli to the line. From fourth on the field in his last time for this qualifying session, across the line he goes and stays fourth by looks of it. But he might have just enough time for one more lap. I'm not 100% sure what the rules stipulate right at the crossover point here. But bear in mind, we're 20 seconds away from the GT4s being unshackled and let loose onto this track. And they are raring to go by looks of it here. We can already see Tom Wells has been timing this one up. Asahi Ota joining him in the pit lane. These two are raring to go here. The 813 across the line a moment ago. Luca Tamburini just beats the bell for one more opportunity to go out on a flying lap. By looks of it there, the 813 calls it quits. The GT4s are now coming out. Bear this in mind. 32's called it quits on their qualifying endeavours. Bukossi 7th in this session. And then we wait to see, I think that's the number 33 we're waiting on there. And so Dennis Damas, new driver on the field, into the top 5. Nothing to scoff at there. And the end of this session, let's see what he can do down towards the line. It was an improvement there. Sadly, not by enough to usurp Marianelli for 4th place. Nonetheless, we'll be starting up alongside him for this grid coming up. So, onto the subject of the GT4s. We see already out on the field among several drivers there was Matthias de Munster. Let's go and catch on board, though, with the one leading that charge. And we see at the moment, it looks to be, yes, as a matter of fact, the number 12, Tom Wells with Ginetta. Now, he did find himself the centre of attention last round, of course, when he went toe-to-toe with Vladislav Mizin, and what a mighty battle that proved to be in Le Castellet. Ultimately, he was skipped of the opportunity that time. And he did put on an absolutely royal fight. I mean, some real David and Goliath stuff there to have the Ginetta go toe-to-toe with the AMG. And actually, for the greater part of that race, put up a really, really solid fight. On paper, you'd never have thought the like would be possible. But the unique conditions brought to us at the midway of this season at Le Castellet's 90-minute round gave us just the right sort of melting pot for a battle like that. And it was really, truly quite something to behold. On board then with Wells. It'll be our first flying lap for the GT4s. I suppose quite the soundtrack indeed to have this time around. Of course, we had the tones of the VR38 DETT engine for Mr. Scallops' Nissan GTR, the first driver out on a flying lap in the GT3s earlier on. We see then down towards Murray's to start their flying lap on board with Wells. Heading up the mountain straight then in towards turn 2. What you're presently hearing is a 3.7 litre naturally aspirated Ford Cyclone V6. So this is quite the tanky little motor for such a tiny car. To be able to cram in a 3.7 litre, bear in mind engines in this category can go as far down as 1.8 litres. That's what you'll find in the Renault Alpine A110. 1.8 litre Renault Nissan Turbo Inline 4. The KTM Crossbow uses the Audi EA113 engine, if I'm not mistaken, and that's from the TT or the S3. It's one of the two there. I think it might have actually been both, but it was a 2 litre Turbo Inline 4. This is a mighty 3.7 litre V6 engine, so seems then that in spite of the fact that the V8s have gone on to dominate in the opening qualifying of 2 today here for the GT3s, is that going to be much of the same story as we've led the charge on both occasions in a V6 car? We started off with Nissan and we're on board with Ginetta on the exit of Forest's Elbow. 55 and the 119 might very well be likely to start their laps first here, as we do see down towards the line is Asahi Ota with Aston Martin. Actually, no, they are just starting their flying laps now. We were on board with Wells over the course of this lap. And it has very much been a case where he's been doing the flying lap. You have to bear with us. We have one of 3 events today. We had AXRL under our belt earlier on. This is our second of 3 events today. We've been up since about 5 o'clock this morning. Live since about 8. So then Wells down towards the line to form the basis of our benchmark times for GT4. Across the line he goes on what appeared to be invalid for him at this time. So a pity. Number 62 coming to the line, Fran Pinto with McLaren. By the looks of it there, the number 12 back onto valid flying laps. So I can't actually tell now whether or not that was supposed to be an outlap or not. No, it was very much a case we were in active flying laps. As we see across the line then, Vladislav Mizin and Matthias de Munster to form the basis of our 2 flying laps so far. Then from behind them is Felix Kobler. So Mercedes not struggling whatsoever. They didn't skip a beat on the opening flurry of flying laps. 1, 2 and 3 at the moment between the number 2, the number 69 and the number 28. But approaching the line here, Zhemak Zulim in the number 91 Aston, now 3rd. Forces new driver Kobler down towards Division 4th. So nearest to the line then, we'll be catching on board with Asahi Ota and the number 55 car. Tom Wells out on another flying lap at the moment, just down through to Solman and McPhillamy, but we'll go and catch on board as just having exited Forest's Elbow is Asahi Ota. Four-litre twin turbo. Thunderous noise there in that Aston Martin. Same engine as you'll find on those leading Mercedes cars. Licensed for export use. The M177, they called it. Down towards the line then. Asahi Ota onto the timing charts. We already saw one Aston Martin. Let's see the other. And right now tucked in behind Zhemak Zulim by only looking at it there, a 307 thousandths of a second. Asahi Ota in the 55. Then from behind him, the 119, Oliver Swaver with McLaren, the one of 2 McLarens of the GT4 field today. They find themselves up and ahead there. Felix Kobler up to Division 5th. Number 12 coming to the line. So we missed out on the first of our opportunities to see onto the timing charts Tom Wells. And with 3.5 minutes left to go of qualifying, he goes Division 5th. Now pushes Oliver Swaver down a peg to 6th. Number 62, Fran Pinto with McLaren. Out through Murray's. Where do they place themselves on their first qualifying in this season? Down towards the line, currently division last there in what is 8th place. Number 69 coming to the line. In front of them, the number 2. Neither of them changing positions there. Mizin continues his hold of pole position. De Munster 2nd place. Number 28 crossed the line a moment ago. Felix Kobler maintains his position of the grid. Division 7th, overall 17th. Zhemak Zulim to the line from Division 3rd. Presently still finds himself stuck Division 3rd at this time, having gained no ground in that last lap just gone. Something to point out though, just between 2nd to 4th, and that's 1 Mercedes and 2 Astons. You're looking there in a factor of only about 1.240. So 1 second and 240 thousandths, or 1 second, 2 tenths and 400ths between those 3 positions there, just in and out of the podium. Nearest to the line then, the 55, Asahi Ota. Division 4th at this time. And as mentioned, needs 1.240 seconds to get up towards 2nd place on the grid. Sadly, couldn't find it in that last lap. 1.5 minutes left to go then, so he's on to his final flying lap here. We're past the point of no return for the majority of drivers on this grid. We see Tom Wells out through the chase. Still division top 5. Wants his chances to fight, though, on that 2nd row of the grid, like he was able to back in Le Castellet. And he does find it there. Division third as it stands, up and ahead of both Aston Martins, both Shemak Zulim and Asahi Ota. And from behind him, the 119, Oliver Swaver maintains what is now a division, looking at it here, 6th. Number 69 coming to the line. Matthias de Munster adamant to claim pole position for his own. He'll have one more opportunity after this flying lap down towards the line. There is an improvement to be found. Now 11.595 from the fastest overall time. Now looking in that more relatively, he's now less than a second away from Vladislav Mizin. 28 across the line a moment ago. Felix Kobler starting their last flying lap. The number 91 approaching the line as well. Shemak Zulim looking to retake the podium away from Tom Wells. Down towards the line goes the number 91. But couldn't find it in that last lap. So much like the majority of the field, bar Mizin and Pinto. Now he is, as we see there, Zulim does throw the towel in. I was about to say, near enough everyone on the track, bar those two, still out and setting times here past the point of no return. We see heading down the Conrad Straight, Asahi Ota. And what used to be the number 33, I wanted to point this one out, used to be the number 33, now the number 55. Confusing times indeed. But of course the new 33 is the new driver up in GT3 with Ford. Dennis Damas. And then down towards the line goes Asahi Ota at the end of qualifying. Where does he find himself at the moment? Division 5th, trying to get up and ahead of Zulim for a chance of 4th place as he makes his way to the line. Was up 0.3 of a second, makes 5th at the end of qualifying there. Starts ahead of the 91, but behind the number 12. Speaking of, let's go and find on board with Tom Wells as he makes his way out of the chase. It looked like a bit of a swerve there, so unlikely to be anything in the way of an improvement as we can see that time hemorrhaging away by over half a second out as he makes his way back to the pit lane. Nonetheless, revels in a second row start, 3rd place for the number 12. Number 69 and number 119 heading down towards the line here. Oliver Swaver and Matthias de Munster. As we see here with Matthias de Munster, he's up by half a second. Now at this time, I don't know if that's going to be enough for him to take pole, but it is going to lay a very solid precedent in. Good run out through turn 23, up by nearly 7/10 as he crosses the line. As he does cross the line there, very, very close indeed, by 4/10 away from Vladislav Mizin. Your two pole sitters then, Dion Helgelian in GT3, Vladislav Mizin in GT4. We'll get onto the full scope of the grid in a moment's time then. Sadly, no news to report on the run into this weekend. You would have thought with 3 available sessions we had between 3 different leagues, we'd have 1 article of news to discuss, but really there isn't an awful lot worth discussing at the moment. Not that much that is relevant to our crowd. So whilst we wait for that grid to form up, we'll be back with you in just a moment's time. We'll leave you with the scope of the session itinerary of what's to come up. We're just at the end of qualifying. You can see there what's coming up for the race. We'll be back with you in a moment's time. So then back into the session, and as the grid forms up, this is the current scope of things then for round 5 of Season 3 of the HCCL Multiclass Championship. Dion Helgilian on pole position for a Ford 1-2 start here in Bathurst, with Stephen Sutton in second place. Mr. Scallops, the current championship lead, in third, and alongside Giacomo Marianelli on the second row. Dennis Damas on his first ever race here makes 5th place, and alongside Anthony Valorio for the third row. Lorenzo Bucossi on his first race alongside Antonio Cardoso for his first race as well. That makes an all-new 4th row. Luca Tamburini, and looking at it there, Amizar make an all-Porsche 5th row at the back of the GT3 field. Into the GT4s, it's an all-Mercedes front row for Vladislav Mizin and Matthias de Munster. These two common occupiers of the front row then. They have dominated in qualifying throughout the season. The two Mercs up at the front. Behind them, Tom Wells looking for a second round of action against the Mercedes cars like he did back in Le Castellet. Przemek Zulim in Division 4th alongside Asahi Ota, with the two starting 14th and 15th, but Division 4th and Division 5th overall. Starting in 16th, Oliver Swaver, Division 6th. And there we see Felix Kobler, Division 7th, but 17th overall. And starting at the back there on what comprises the back of the 9th row of this grid is Fran Pinto, Division 8th, overall 18th.
30 seconds.
And very good timing there as we get on to the 30-second warning. On board with Dion Helgilian. Of course, last time he took a race victory in this season was at the season opener for the GT3 category. Helgilian then looking to make a return after 3 rounds worth of victory drought, taken up by the 394 Nissan of Mr. Scallops. Could it be the time to shine for the 45 once again? Well, we're about to find out here in what is set to be an hour of racing to follow here in Bathurst. So on board with Helgilian. He now takes us away onto the field. Alongside him, Stephen Sutton. Now this is going to make a very difficult to follow front row for the drivers behind them, the two V6s then of Nissan and Ferrari. We know that Nissan's got good straightaway speed, but where it seems to be lacking is in maneuverability over the Ford. Something just wasn't clicking over the course of qualifying. It's been enough to put him on the podium, but it's not been enough to far and away secure pole position. So something isn't 100% there for that 394. Can it be the case that he can make this one back up over the course of the hour of racing set to follow? Of course, mandatory pit stop for both fuel and tyres in today's race. A departure from last round's regulations that had a 90-minute race with 2 mandatory pit stops. What a sight that is to behold then up the mountain straight. Currently the scope of 18 cars in all on this grid today. 10 in GT3, 8 in GT4. Taking a look around that field, of course, this is from the view of Mr. Scallops, starting 3rd in today's race with Nissan. Staring at the back end of those 2 Fords. Right behind him, you can see there, just looming around the corner at the cuttings, is Giacomo Marianelli's Ferrari. Speaking of, here is Marianelli. It was a confusing one for Marianelli because, if I'm not mistaken, having a look through the last couple of rounds here, he's been a little bit on and off with attendance. So having made his way back into the scope of competition proper, having missed out the last round, and then he's sort of been on, off, on, off, on, off. He attended round 1 and 3, was not available for rounds 2 and 4. So maybe he's just got a fondness for the odd numbers. The number 51 back on the grid once again, finds himself Division 7th in terms of the championship standings. Starts this race today, though, on the grid in 4th. You see towards the back of the field here, another story of Ferrari, and that's Lorenzo Bucossi. Lines up behind Anthony Valorio, but alongside Antonio Cardoso. We see trouble, so it does appear, for Tamburini. Luca Tamburini shows that he's already taken his mandatory pit stop. That often means a disconnect on the starting grid. Nonetheless, he maintains his starting position alongside that of Zar. And Mizar and the number 92 lines up behind him. Looking down at the GT4 grid, of course, 2 Mercedes up at the front row. This is the view from Tom Wells' point of view. So much in the same stead as what we're seeing in GT3. We've got a car with a plucky V6 engine up against 2 V8s at the front row. And as we saw from Scallops' point of view, so too do we see here from Wells. going to make for a curious race indeed. Bathurst brings with it an inherent sense of chaos every single time it's been ran, no matter the championship, no matter the discipline. Today will not likely be an exemption to that rule. The mountain giveth and the mountain taketh away. Really, no truer word has been spoken. We're about to see that with an hour of racing set to follow. Back on board then with the leading Mustang of Helge. Down through the chase then. Beginning that formation process, you see all the GT3s get side by side with each other there. The GT4s lining up behind them. As we begin the scope of running down towards the line. Now, of course, turn 23 in our way before we get to that point. But it's a very, very short run to the line, so the drivers have to be ready here, quick on the trigger. This is a Old West style start then for round 5 of the championship here in the land down under, here in Bathurst, New South Wales. 18 cars in all, 10 from GT3, 8 from GT4. An hour of racing set to follow just past the season midway here in Season 3. And we're green and racing here in the land down under. A brilliant start by Sutton as we see already up and alongside Helge trying to go the long way around down at turn 1. Those two very nearly exchange positions. Further down the line, we see all the way off in the background goes Przemek Zulem and Matthias de Munster. So already some calamity down in the GT4 field. Meanwhile, we see a brilliant start by Giacomo Marianelli. Gets up and around Mr. Scallops, but with Mr. Scallops striking back on the mountain straight, there is a chance here Ferrari could lose the podium. Nonetheless, a brilliant start by Ford. Helge breaks away from Sutton. Scallops falls down, though, to 4th place. With Dennis Damas on his tail, the new driver in the number 33 Ford looking at his chances of 4th place. You see here for Giacomo Marianelli, an ecstatic start by the Italian. Already hunting down Stephen Sutton. He's closing in on that Mustang. Meanwhile, Dion Helgelien is starting to break away almost immediately, having just made our way halfway around the track, out through McPhillamy Park, down towards Skyline for the first time. And what a sight this is going to be, as we see here rushing down through this section of the track. All of the GT3s we see here from Lorenzo Picossi's point of view, down in 7th, up and ahead of Tamburini. Having a look in the GT4s as well to give us the scope of what's going on here. Things have stayed near enough as they are, bar one exemption, of course. Matthias de Munster being knocked down a peg. We see him now tucked in behind Asahi Ota. That does leave the stage bare for these two fated rivals to once again come into arms for the race lead. As we see in the background, big trouble for Swaver. And there we saw Asahi Ota was into the wall as well. Immediate troubles down at Forest's elbow. This was from the point of view as we were taking a look in from behind Tom Wells as he made his way out of Forest's elbow. In the background, we saw there into the wall with Swaver, and then Asahi Ota into the wall trying to avoid Swaver. On board then with Asahi Ota, now plumb last of the field after that calamity. Meanwhile, down at the chase, the number 28 car has been caught out, Felix Kobler. We see here with Matthias de Munster trying to get up on the inside of Oliver Swaver. But that McLaren has held on for dear life on the exit of turn 23. As we see here for de Munster. Currently fighting for Division 4th over Swaver. Actually, this is Division 3rd, so it stands. As we see here, one of the major things we tend to forget here, especially about McLaren, rare sight on the field indeed, but they are formidable in the straights. So in this fight for 3rd, Swaver, even in spite of the damage over his nose, is still right along with the number 69 AMG of de Munster. Meanwhile, just to take away from what we have here as well, Stephen Sutton has taken the lead of this race over Dion Helgelien. Helgelien has the fastest lap at the moment. He's off by half a second. Meanwhile, Giacomo Marianelli still hunting down the two Mustangs and still very close in range. Mr. Scallops behind him 4th, with Dennis Damas rounding out the top 5 as we make our way down through the S's. So that sudden change of position amongst the two Fords was not one we were coming to expect here. We were more inclined to believe that Ferrari were set to fight with the number 7 Ford, but it has been a sudden turn of fate here for Stephen Sutton, taking the lead up over Dion Helgelien as we get on to the Conrad Straight. Bear in mind, this is as ample an opportunity as it was for him to take position as it will be for Helgelien to take it back. So on the run down towards the chase here, what is the current strategy? Heading down through the chase, nothing as of this time. Meanwhile, into the pit lane on an emergency stop goes Fran Pinto. Also immediate troubles for the 119 of Oliver Swaver. This is down through Skyline. So we see here just about what you'd relatively expect to see. Heavy damage there on that 570S. And that looks borderline inoperable in my opinion. So that could very well be the end of the line here for Swaver. So having a look then as they come rocketing out through turn 1 onto what is now technically lap 2 of this race. Sutton from Helgelien, Marinelli, Scallops, Damas, Villorio, Bucossi, Tamburini, Zart and Cardoso in the GT3 field. Then from the GT4 point of view as they make their way down towards turn 1 for the second time in this race, technically the third time after lap 0. It's Mizin, Wells, De Munster, Zulim, Kobler and Ota. Getting a look in here with some of the fights towards the back of the field. Amizar versus Luca Tamburini, the two Porsches likely to go head-to-head now. Both of them are up in position from where they started this race from. 9th and 10th, now 8th and 9th. That's much to the chagrin of the 888 of Antonio Cardoso. The AMG looks relatively unscathed. Didn't have the greatest of race starts. Meanwhile, up front, two Fords are getting close. The chances are absolutely still on the table for these two to fight once again, but it has been a start of the ages here in the opening 5 minutes for Stephen Sutton. As we were watching with the incident down in GT4, we missed out on seeing the exchange of hands then for the lead of the GT3 division. Sutton up and ahead of Helgelien. Things are starting to stabilise up over that second row with the chances for Scallops to fight with Marinelli in the next couple of laps here. The two V6s to go head-to-head on that second row of the grid. One driver that's not lost any ground here. As a matter of fact, has had a very solid start, all things considered. It's been hanging around, looming over the shoulder then of that 394. It's the 33 of Dennis Damas on his first race in this series. Has kicked things off with a very, very solid start indeed. So you start to see that front and second row, a definite split forming there as it's double the gap between first and second as it is to second and third. So the two Fords are breaking away, leaving Ferrari stranded at the mercy of Nissan. And another Ford joins them there at the back of that top five. Behind them as well, infighting amongst Ferraris, with the chances for the 296 to go head-to-head with the 488. Anthony Villorio in 6th place on this grid. Meanwhile, as we see here, Matthias de Munster now catching up to Tom Wells. Now, this is in the fight for Division 2nd here. We'll stay on board with the AMG. Now, this is the area where they have a great advantage here over Ginetta in these straightaway sections. You can see it there start to top out. The Ginetta, very short gear ratio. So while it can get up to its registered top speed very, very quickly, its registered top speed is about 10 to 15 miles an hour slower than most of these GT4s. So in the Conrad Straight is really where Wells is going to start feeling the dramatic effects of his engine limiter. Meanwhile, we do have yellow flags up ahead. Imminent danger then coming up. As back into the pit lane went the number 62. I believe that is Fran Pinto, if I'm not mistaken. So we're back into green flag conditions on our way through McPhillamy down towards Skyline Hill from the point of view of Matthias de Munster, fighting for that Division 2nd against Tom Welsh. Ginetta against Mercedes for the second week running in this championship, but this time with a different Mercedes in tow. Speaking of last week's Mercedes as well, Vladislav Mizin's now 10 seconds up the field from these two at this time. Heading down towards the chase. He's got to look up the inside. Excuse me. Had a chance to look up the inside there, but the Ginetta, just with such brilliant cornering, was able to just poke its way up and around the outside of the run in towards the chase. The Mercedes had practically no chance there. Now, cutting away just briefly from these two as we look at the scope of things after 10 minutes of racing. And as it stands, those two Fords have quickly distanced themselves from the rest of the field here, separate by about 2.5 seconds now to Marianelli in third place. Now, having to vehemently fend off third away from... Oh, my word, did you see how close he was to the wall on the run-in through to Brock Skyline there? Mr. Scallops driving with a vengeance now in that 394. Taking a look back at the GT4 fighting here. So looking at the current scope of things right now, Stephen Sutton leads away from Dion Helgelian by a fine margin here. As a matter of fact, as we see on board with these two, the chances for these two to exchange positions again for the race lead are very likely. The 45 on the run down towards the chase by 0.3 of a second. Looking at his chances over the number 7. Sutton v Helgelian at the forefront of racing. Now, as we read further down the order, we'll stay on with the fight on our screens here for the lead of this race. As we see behind Giacomo Marianelli 3rd, Mr. Scallops 4th, Dennis Damas in 5th with Anthony Valorio in 6th, Lorenzo Bucossi in 7th ahead of Luca Tamburini in 8th, Amizar in 9th, and Antonio Cardoso in 10th. Vladislav Mizin in division 1st. And we'll go by division rankings. We see there, having stepped in the way, that's the 119 of Oliver Swaver. Puts a temporary sort of hamper over this fight for the lead of the race. And it has given Helgelian his opportunity that he's been searching for since having lost the race lead out over Stephen Sutton to poke his way up the inside. But he just can't find the room for it. Down through Griffin's Bend, no dice. So in the GT4 standings, Miz in first, Wells second, De Munster incredibly close. And as we just see it there, got up and around him on the Conrod straight for second place. Wells now third, De Munster second, Julian fourth, Ota fifth. And ooh, that is all manner of broken for Cobbler. Swaver set to move up a position then to 6th as it stands right now, but he is temporarily at least in the way here of Dennis Damas. Dangerously close to the wall of death there. And oh, in the background, that's Anthony Valorio turned around trying to avoid the 119 of Swaver. He's done very, very well not to completely total the car, but you can see there the Ferrari in a moment of hesitance saw the 119 and just got right down onto the brakes. It was a horrible place there to encounter the 119. I'm not sure why the McLaren ducked back in onto the racing line there. A confusing spectacle indeed. As for Valorio, he does drop a few positions, now having dropped in behind the 92, so down in 9th place as Amizar moves up to 8th. The chances are still rich and plentiful for the opportunity for Helgelian to continue to fight Sutton every step of the way, nearly into the first quarter hour of racing. Meanwhile, things livening up on that second row. Marianelli pushing that Ferrari to its absolute limit, mind you. The Nissan staying very, very close. I think maybe the strategy at this time by Scallops is to wait for his opponent to weigh himself down, to wear himself out, and make a mistake that way. It's just going to be a game of constant pressure to keep his opponents in check. Meanwhile, assessing the aftermath then of that move for second, De Munster having moved up by 0.6 of a second as we break away onto the Conrod straight. That is only likely to continue to climb here with the AMG able to get much more out of the top end. We see into the pits goes Amizar in the 92. You can see damage over the nose of the Porsche as he makes his way to the pit box. In the pit lane there, we see Fran Pinto. So let's go and catch on board with our front two rows as it stands then up in GT3, where the bulk of our action seems to be located today. Stephen Sutton, your race leader, on his way down through Skyline in towards the S's and the Dipper. This is very much so in that continued fight for first place. He has had a brilliant start to this race then. coming up onto traffic there. Felix Kobler up in front of him in the number 28 AMG. Likely to arrive on scene here by the time we get down towards the chase, already giving him the lights. Knows that he can't be held up by traffic again like the last time around where Oliver Suevo was accidentally up over the nose of both of the Mustangs at the front of GT3's grid. In through the chase, just as expected there. That's when he runs into the AMG. Has to try and get up and around the outside down towards Murray's. Bear in mind, Helgulian is right on top of him there. Down through to turn 23. He still holds on to that race lead, but by a thinning margin. You can see lost 4/10 out over Helgulian in the last lap alone. Assessing the situation here, Sutton knows he's got the performance in the corners to keep Helgulian at bay, but it's a case that being on the straights here with two very large straights, mind you, 1.1 and 1.9 kilometers respectively. It's really a case of if he can't shake him off in the corners, it's a game of when and not if the number 45 will find enough slipstream to put himself side by side again. We've already seen it a few times, albeit with prevailing circumstances, but we know what's coming, and there's not a great deal we can do to fight that. So in Sutton's case, he's just got to attack every single corner as fast as humanly possible here. He's having to push that machine well beyond operating capacity to keep himself in check here. Riding the walls by such a close margin there. Could fit a coin between the car and the wall. Meanwhile, we saw just a glimpse there, that second row. That was Marinelli, still third place, defending away from Mr. Scallop. So much as the case as we've seen here. Well, the one starting originally second and fourth. It's been a great start of things today then for Sutton and Marinelli. 4/10 of a second as we enter the Conrod straight out through turn 19. Bear in mind, this also comes down to a game of setups as well. Slipstream's one thing, but if you've got a lower aero setup, you're always going to find yourself at a greater advantage on the run down this section here. We did see, though, these two very, very close in terms of the way those vehicles have been set up. Because it still maintains there that 5/10 of a second gap after all things said and done. In towards turn 23 we go. Past the first quarter hour of a race, so it is flying by quickly here in Bathurst. 3/10 difference to the benefit of Sutton in that last lap. Stephen Sutton does stand upon the chances here in the early doors of this race to bring home his first victory of the season. Down through to Griffin's Bend. Meanwhile, assessing the fight from behind, we now see it's about a second and a tenth the gap between Mr. Scallops and Marinelli on the second row. So action still far closer at the forefront of GT3 than it is on its second row. In terms of the previous fights that we've seen from earlier on, the 69 versus the 12 has spread out massively. So we'll just quickly dive away from these two as there is another very close by fight to be observed. I believe at that time, no, it was between two different divisions. Never mind, false alarm. We catch on board then with the attacking angle of this continued fight of first place, having cut away from the defending angle of Stephen Sutton, now back on board with Dion Helgulian, the man who started this race from pole position, but now has had to fight every single step of the way to reclaim it. Bear in mind, coming up on traffic there, you can see Asahi Ota. That bright green, Aston Martin Racing Green, I should point out as well, the old school Aston Martin Racing Green, number 55, V8 Vantage. You see there, this has probably been the best area for them to have caught the Vantage up at this time. Helgulian up the inside. Minimal issues there involved we can start to see the actual physical scope of that second row fight, or what's currently left of it, is it's 0.8 of a second, but Marinelli definitely got his chances there, about 3 or 4 car lengths up over Mr. Scallops. Was able to bring that up to, at its highest, 1.1 seconds. And at the moment, it does look very close to that. Now, there's been quite the ebb and flow between those two. They've been bouncing around the same kind of limits for the last 20 minutes of this race. Our focus so far has been on the forefront of action here in Bathurst. The two Mustangs thunder down under here. The two V8s head to head. No strangers to this field. You can see there a little bit of grass on the right hand side, so having to just pump the brakes a little bit, Stephen Sutton, before he finds himself a victim of the various G-forces exerted on the car on the run downhill. Not really sure what else to say there. I mean, say many things, not many of them friendly enough for the stream, because you will get kicked up the backside if you let this circuit get the upper hand on you. The exit of turn 19 we see in the background again is that second row fight. The camera's a little slow to pick up on the fight over the front row. 0.2 of a second, so this is the closest it's been in quite some time between these two since the exchange of position between Sutton and Helgelien. So down towards the chase we go. Helgelien eyeing up his chances in the inside, backs onto the racing line. Was hoping that Sutton would play early defence and compromise his own line. Ultimately, that's backfired for the 45. As we see there, Shemak Zulim in the number 91 Aston being passed up by the two Mustangs. Again, they've gotten quite lucky when it's the Aston Martins. They've just not been lucky at all when it's McLaren. Very, very strange indeed. That McLaren is starting to become somewhat of a fell omen. I mean, you can see here, again, a case in point. When they ran into a McLaren for the first time, it was the 119, and accidentally held the pair of them up down the mountain straight, or up the mountain straight, more relevantly. And there, just on the run into the cuttings, they run into another McLaren, that time being Fran Pinto. Now, all of this is more or less just teasing. This isn't us trying to suggest that the McLaren cars are deliberately blocking. It's just been a case where it's quite a funny pattern that we've picked up on. It's totally coincidental, let's be completely honest with ourselves. But I do find the idea quite funny that McLaren has become somewhat of a fell omen when it comes to lapping traffic. It's almost like the running joke back in the older days of the World Endurance Championship. The Ferrari 458 would just specifically target prototypes. We did have a momentary yellow flag there amongst the GT4s. I believe that was just one scrambling to get out of the way of the GT3s. We see Tom Wells being intercepted by the two Mustangs. Now, this is going to be a frightening sight for him. You see there the golf-coloured number 12. Up through to the chase we go then. You've got to respect it out of these two. They have put on one hell of a fight in the opening half of this race. They've been able to stay within about a second of each other at the worst of times, within about 0.2 of each other at the best of times. And they've been able to navigate what is the greater part of the entire grid so far. They've only got De Munster and Mizin to pass up here before they've effectively navigated the entire GT4 grid. We see De Munster in the pit lane for an earlier pit stop. That leaves Mizin out by his lonesome at the forefront of GT4. They've been able to navigate the entire GT4 field worth of lapped traffic while still fighting with each other at every single stop here. So this has been absolutely sensational between the two American talents at the front of this race. Just quickly cutting away from these two as well as their fight continues on into the cuttings. We see the number 51 and the number 394 getting closer and closer and closer. So where it's been an all V8 front row battle, it's an all V6 second row battle. We start to see perhaps just a little bit of the issues surrounding the Nissan, but let's not exactly say the Ferrari's out of the woods here when it comes to issues itself. You see here for Marinelli, he is really having to focus any kind of car being in his way is an immediate threat. So he's run into Tom Wells at possibly the worst time to have run in to the GT4s. Both of them have to slam the brakes on to tuck in behind the number 12, down through the S's and into the dipper. This has put a huge hamper on their fight. The GT4s, bless them, they're not trying to get in the way here. They've just been caught up at the worst possible place to try and move out of the way. Meanwhile, looking on with the fight here between Helgelien and Sutton, back into the fight of first place, as we can see practically pushing each other down towards the line here. So we see on board here with Stephen Sutton, the defending angle of 2. We saw briefly there with the 45. Now we see from the number 7. We see C diving for the pit lane. By the looks of it there, goes that of Dion Helgelien. So that brings to the end the fight of first place for the time being. Helgelien attempting an undercut strategy then with 35 minutes left to go in the session. As for Mr. Scallops, same story. As Marianelli stays out, Scallops is in. It's a bit of a precarious run into the pit lane. If I can try and catch on board with any of the drivers making their way in, we can get an actual view of just how sketchy that entrance is. I believe we might actually be seeing... Oh, no, never mind. I thought we were about to see one there from Asahi Ota. Unlikely. We see here from Tamburini and Valorio. Neither of them considering runs to the pit lane. So we already saw the number 69 in earlier on. So we see here, Dennis Damas trying to get up and around Tom Wells, the 33, having a spot bother up through Quarry Corner. Narrowly avoids the wall of death there by mere inches. Ooh, that was very sketchy onto the brakes there. I mean, it goes to show when these drivers get into a fine pattern about it, they have got the car right on the ragged edge, and such is the case with the 33 of Damas. I mean, that was... I think even a millisecond later, that would have been him in the wall at that time. You see here, various different lengths of the race here for multiple cars on the field. We see Amizar clipped the wall there, down at the S's. Oh, and into the wall on the far end. Narrowly avoiding contact with Tamburini and Valorio. Amizar, big hit against the wall. And it's super easy in this section of the track to ping-pong off those walls. Luca Tamburini nearly found himself victim of the very same affliction. And ultimately, that's what cost him 5th place off from Anthony Valorio, who now moves up to 5th in the number 41. We see, though, connection a little bit unstable there, so we'll try to catch on board with Valorio instead. Tamburini's connection's a little bit on the fritz as we head towards the halfway mark of round 5. Meanwhile, taking a look at the scope of things, with Stephen Sutton's in the pit lane, and so too is Giacomo Marianelli attempting to cover off the undercut set in stone by Helgelien and Scallops. We see at this time it's been Dennis Damas to take the lead of this race, with Lorenzo Bucossi now up to 2nd, Valorio up to 3rd, Tamburini up to 4th. So we see down across the line, Stephen Sutton released from the pit lane, but it's going to be so close here to make sure he doesn't get intercepted by Helgelien. He just manages there past the exit of the pit lane. Is it going to be the same story here for the likes of Marianelli? He's just released from the box now as Mr. Scallops. You can hear the sound of that V6 come around turn 1, and Mr. Scallops catches Marianelli. So Nissan achieved on the undercut where Ford had failed. Helgelien still has to fight things out on track then to the checkered flag with Stephen Sutton, now albeit at a further distance than he'd prefer things to be at this time, and with GT4s in the way. Not a pleasant time indeed. In the pit lane, or I should say out of the pit lane, we see here Przemak Zulin with Aston Martin, and following him as well was that of, I believe, yes, that's Oliver Sueva. No news then from Mizin at this time. We'll see here with the Ukrainian talent, 3-time race winner this season. Does he come into the pits? Yes, he does. Into the pit lane goes the number 2. Will the number 12 follow suit? We'll have to wait a little while and see, because he's just on the start of the Conrod Straight. As for Tamburini, still pursuing Valorio. As we've seen, even in spite of the fact that both of the fights have re-emerged, one in favour of the driver avoiding the undercut, the other in favour of the driver attempting it, they have still reignited to be within 2 seconds of each other at a rate of knots there. And I think that is, at least in part, thanks to the GT4s. Into the pits goes Damas and Bukossi. We'll see what the suggestion is for Valorio. Doesn't show really any signs of moving into the pit lane. What's the current story for Luca Tamburini? Into the pits goes the 813. So Valorio stays out to take the lead of this race. Under strategy, he won't hold on to it, but we'll see exactly what the 41's planning on doing. He takes the lead. We see here the warring duo, Sutton and Helgelian, still duking things out here. This is going to be a very exciting conclusion to this race if the opening half has been anything to go by. And moreover, taking a look here, the strike back already underway by Giacomo Marianelli within half a second of Mr. Scallops. You would have thought with the Nissan out in front that the advantage would have quickly shifted into the hands of the 394. It has been anything but there. He is out in front, make no mistake of it, but he's not been able to run away with the position he's now claimed. He is still having to fight tooth and nail for it, knowing very much so that over the course of the next 29 minutes, it is going to become harder and harder to avoid Ferrari. Meanwhile, we see here for the two Fords continuing to fight for what is currently second on the field between the pair of them, soon to be back in for that fight of the race lead. And they have had this just carved out to such a fine art here. It is really quite something to watch. See two drivers very familiar with each other's game here. Very closely matched for pace. Same machine. Carving their way around a track like this. I mean, it is absolute magic. These two absolutely lasered in on one another. There is no world that exists on this grid outside of these two in their eyes. And that has been the current story of the day then. Such precision. Down towards the chase we go. The 41. We'll see if the suggestion is there for Valorio to come into the pit lane. And by the looks of it there, we can see the little plume of dust. That would suggest to me someone's come in. And it's the number 12, not the 41. So Tom Wells into the pit lane from third in GT4. You can see Valorio still up the field there in the number 41 Ferrari 488. These two Mustangs continuing to fight things out from behind. Meanwhile, we see here Giacomo Marianelli and Mr. Scallops get up and around Vladislav Mizin. Retakes position off of Wells. Back up into what appears to be the lead of GT4 at this time. So yes, number 2 back into the lead. Wells from the pit lane. Meanwhile, we see just coming around turn 23 at Murray's is Matthias de Munster. So Wells' current aim is to find himself back on the podium again. So he's looking to avoid being intercepted by the 91. Every chance is there as we see him drop off the jack. So yes, he has lost out the chances of second to the 69, who makes his way up the mountain straight as we speak. But he looks to be secured against an advance by Aston Martin at this time at least. So yes, as we see there goes Tom Wells back onto the field. Only 2 drivers left to pit then. Fran Pinto at the back of the GT4 field. We just see the 62 there on our markers come in. And there we see the McLaren into the pit lane. So the only driver left is Anthony Valorio. You see behind him, held up by a lapped GT3. Now, this is a rare occasion for these two. They've been dealing with slower GT4s for the majority of this race. They're up past Amizar. Down towards the chase we go. Valorio out in front of them. You can physically see the Ferrari, so it's a case of when, not if. If Valorio's going to hold out for this long. We see, though, going into the pit lane. There goes Anthony Valorio. So now this returns these two to the forefront of fighting in this race. Back in to the fight of the race lead. We're on board with Dion Helgilian back into the fight of first. It's a pity then for what has been such a great exchange between these two that we missed out on the first part of it. Investigating an incident down in GT4. We've been able to stay very close to the aftermath of said move, with Sutton leading the charge and a fantastic defense here on towards the charge of his first win this season, and to become in the GT3 category the third unique name for Season 3's GT3 category winners, after Dion Helgilian on our screens at the moment and Mr. Scallops. It is up to these two to return forward to the top step. But who may it be? That being the real question. Down through Forest's elbow we go. So as we've dropped past the halfway mark of the session as well, well past it as a matter of fact, and with Giacomo Marianelli in the pit lanes at this time. This is, hang on a moment, this looks to be serious trouble for Marianelli. This has been pay dirt for Mr. Scallops, who's now moved up into a secure third place. But as we can see here for the 51, that looks like severe damages in the 32. Now joins them from the pit lane. Lorenzo Bicossi also in trouble. Now, we were watching on board with the leading fight between the two Mustangs. We see that while this was a scheduled pit stop for Marianelli, it has definitely not been the case for Bicossi. He was up towards that top 5. That could see Anthony Valorio through to 5th by the end of this race. As we see there, that was the retirement of the 32. Lorenzo Bicossi is out of round 5. Of the championship. So for Anthony Valorio, that's a promotion to 5th. For Tamburini, that's up to 6th. For Marianelli, that's up to 7th. We see here Helgilian still trying for a move up over the number 7. See joining us in chat there, Wishful Winnings, driver we've seen before over on VSR. Asking if they're looking for drivers. He's looking for a weekend league. Well, I believe, yes, the sign-ups are still open for this. Ongoing, of course, as always, as we've seen a few new drivers into today's race. Among them, we see the 33, Dennis Damas with Ford. Looking further around the field, we had Lorenzo Bicossi, but now sadly out of this race. We see Amizar, new driver on the field as well. Felix Kobler with severe damage to his car, Fran Pinto at this time as well. Back on board, though, with that leading pairs. I think things are definitely sizing up to get very, very spicy in the last 23 minutes of racing here in Bathurst. We see just the dramatic effect the slipstream has on the Conrod Straight. 1.9 kilometers here, front to back, as we head down towards the chase. Is it going to be a look up the inside? No, because Sutton defends for position, holding the inside line. Now, he is going to trim away a little bit of momentum here. It's going to make the next couple of attempts all the more easier. But if he can deny him the space, he can keep him in the dirty air, and he'll continue to burn the tyres out quicker than the leading number 7. Down towards turn 1. The 45 does have the run for the outside here. Down at Hell Corner. Much, much later on the brakes to put it to abreast. So on the run up the mountain, he is going to have himself up the inside. So we see here, it is a drag race. Look at the gap between the pair of them here. Practically cruising uphill right alongside one another. Looking here, he can glance over his right shoulder and see into the cockpit at one point. It's contact between the 45 and the 7. Into the wall goes Helgilian after what was a fantastic fight between these two. Dion Helgilian takes up the helm of the race lead after a controversial bout between himself and Stephen Sutton down at Griffin's Bend. Is this the potential flashpoint of their rivalry on track? It's returned Helgilian to the front of the field. Stephen Sutton held on to such a valiant lead, but it all came apart there. Meanwhile, yellow flags out up in front for the number 51. That's Giacomo Marianelli down through Skyline. So these two Mustangs are approaching very, very quickly to the scene of that incident. And so it seems that Marianelli has got himself up and running. So I think they've just dodged the bullet here through the dipper. Still on board then with Stephen Sutton. Looking to catch on board then with the newly crowned race leader, Dion Helgilian. Back up to the lead, then started from pole position, and after 40 minutes of racing, finally returns to the lead of this race. And making our way down towards the chase here. We are definitely back into a fight at first place because Stephen Sutton looks up the inside in the number 7, in towards turn 20 and 21. Couldn't find any space of it. Less momentum to carry from the shallower line. That gave the 45 extra leeway to stay in the lead of this race. In towards turn 23 we go. We're absolutely within the chances here to see these two go side by side once again. All it takes is one slight stutter out through one of these corners, and that's exactly what Helgilian is worried about. That stab of oversteer has just kicked away probably the chance to build an extra 2, maybe 3/10 over Stephen Sutton on the mountain straight. That's what's allowed the number 7 to hover over the back end of the 45, to look up the inside, up towards Griffin's Bend. Now, do they avoid contact this time around? Absolutely, as they go side by side, and it's Sutton back to the lead. A great move then by Stephen Sutton. He really had to get quite brave with that one. Up through the inside of Griffin's Bend, then to the outside of the cuttings. Few men would dare, very few would succeed. But as we saw it there from Sutton, back to the lead of this race. 19 minutes to go. Bit of a stab there in through Solomon and McPhillamy. Just up past the wall of death, very nearly caught the back end out. Down through Brock's Skyline. These two have to be careful not to focus too hard on each other. Super easy to lose track of where you are on track here in Bathurst. Just so many corners to consider, all 23 in all. Down through to turn 18 and 19. We see a little plume of smoke up in front there. That's the 119. Oliver Swaver in GT4 looks to be in a spot of bother here. Something amiss with that McLaren for him to be scraping the grass. Oh, my word, off in the background. They're having slammed through those sponsor boards. Meanwhile, up in front, we do very quickly approach the scene of an incident here for the number 51. And as we see in the wall there, that's Felix Kobler and the number 28. And with the 51 back into the pit lane after an emergency tow, I think it's realistic to assume that Marianelli might very well be out of this race. And yes, the 51 has left. So Giacomo Marianelli caught up in some kind of unknown to this moment incident with the 28 and is now out of this race. The 119 in trouble as well down through that sector. All the meanwhile, we did see some side-by-side action between Helgilian and Sutton, but to no avail. 17.5 minutes left to go. See in the background there, that was Amizar being lapped by Mr. Scallops. You see there the Nissan get up and around the Porsche in towards turn 2. Looking on with the leading Mustang then. We've been watching on for some time with the 45. We see on board with the number 7 on with Stephen Sutton, current race leader. And in the time we've been watching with him, he's starting to build that gap up. 0.6 was momentarily 0.7 of a second. Any higher than that, he's going to find himself in sort of that golden zone for getting rid of a lot of the benefits found in the slipstream. You can get yourself north of about 8 tenths. It makes it much, much harder for your opponent to close the gap, as they have far less slipstream to tuck into compared to when they're, say, 4, 3, 2 tenths away, as we're seeing at the moment. Slowly being drawn back in is Dion Helgelian. 16 minutes left to go, nearly 3/4 of an hour into round 5. And following on the trails of what was a spectacular round in Le Castellet has been a brilliant one here in Bathurst into the second half of Season 3 proper. You see here for Stephen Sutton. Between him and the checkered flag lies 15 minutes 43 seconds. And moreover, the number 45. You see, accidentally putting a bit of a hamper on their fight for the time being, putting it on ice for now. By 0.7 of a second was Asahi Ota out through turn 1. So that gives us the opportunity to take a look after 45 minutes of racing at what the current scope of the grid looks like after this amount of time. We see for the GT3s, it has been slaughter throughout today's race. They remain with only 7 cars of the 10 who started, one of which, that being Amizar, stranded amongst the GT4s for the overall standing. So you see at the moment, it's been a chartered saga here, Ford against Ford, a civil war of the Fords in today's race here in Bathurst. Stephen Sutton versus Dion Helgelian at the front row. Sutton first, Helgelian second, Scallops to third, and Damas to fourth, Velorio fifth, and Tamburini in sixth. Then into the GT4s, Miz in first, Demunster second, Wells third, Zulim fourth, Ota fifth, Cobbler sixth, Sueva seventh, and Pinto eighth. Rami Zar, he's provisionally 7th in category, 12th overall. You see caught up by some traffic, that being Shemak Zulim with Aston Martin. Do you see this has brought the fight for the lead very much back into question, back on board with Stephen Sutton. As a matter of fact, we'll quickly cut away from Sutton to get on board with the attacking angle here of Dion Helgelian, just to give ourselves a slightly better view of things. So we can physically see there the gap over the nose, shrinking between the 45 and the 7. The 7 holds the inside in towards the chase, holds ground away from Helgelian, makes it very difficult for him to find any amount of space through the chase there. And for his efforts, 7 tenths of a second. Meanwhile, the 119, Oliver Sueva in trouble down through Skyline Hill. Continued struggles there for McLaren in today's race. Meanwhile, the 28 brings out the yellow flags down at the chase. I believe that is for Felix Cobbler at this time. The 41 narrowly avoids him. That's the second time now in that section of the track that Cobbler has had trouble. Running up onto Tom Wells here. Stephen Sutton forced into an awkward spot. Again, not the first time he's run into traffic at this area of the track, but he's got to play things very carefully. So you can see up the inside, there are those curbs that appear. And as we see there, the number 7 does collide with the number 12 into the wall. Goes both Stephen Sutton and Tom Wells. How on earth has he not collided with the wall? Trying to make sense of that situation. We were hoping the external cameras were going to be of any kind of favour to us here. And as we saw, as he went up and around McPhillamy, tapped with the Ginetta, spun all the way around. I am genuinely surprised as to how he's not come away with serious damage. But for Stephen Sutton, it has scattered his chances of a race win with 12 minutes left to go. For Dion Helgelian, he's back up in charge of it in the number 45. So, checking around the grid for where nearby fights could be kicking off from. At this time, with that battle now dissipated, we find ourselves with very little, if anything, to speak of. There is perhaps the consideration of Scallops v Sutton. Bear in mind, that spin would have well, maybe not done an awful lot to his aerodynamics in terms of damage. It will have definitely overheated those Pirellis, so it does leave him vulnerable for available grip against the Nissan. As we see on board with the Nissan here of Mr. Scallops, out through turn 1. Meanwhile, just having a quick look in here, we see being held up behind the McLaren. Looks to be, that is Vladislav Mizin. So, as we see on board here with the number 2, Oliver Swaver up over in front of him. Ten minutes then left to go in this race. With the last of those battles killed off effectively, we'll be waiting to see if there is anything to be expected of a potential fight between Scallops and Sutton, as we've seen over the course of the last half lap there. Now that's part and parcel thanks to the lap traffic again of Tom Wells, has forced a 6-second wedge up between the Ford and the Nissan. And now that podium scattered between each other there. No one driver looking to be able to gain any advantage amongst that top 3. Enough to put themselves in side-by-side fighting positions by the end of this race. Helge Lien then has effectively been rolled out the red carpet from that racing incident before to a second win this season, returning to the top step since the opening round. So having a look around the field, we do see, actually, just having caught there, and this is with the Mustang of, having a look here, if we can go and find him. Dennis Damas, 4th place in this race at the moment, but as you can see there, considerable front-end damage on the 33 since the last time we saw him. With 8.5 minutes left to go, 19 seconds currently stand between himself and Anthony Valorio. He needs to keep that car in the straight and narrow. As I say that, Dion Helge-Lien in trouble down at Skyline. Could that be Sutton back through to the lead of the race? It is! It is! What on earth happened for the 45? He looks to have come out of things at least with only minor damages, but it looked like trouble for the 45 down through Skyline Hill. We saw the leading triangle go bright yellow, and our hearts sank for a second there in the thought that Helge Lien might have obliterated that car at that area of the track. He's very lucky to have come out of that with only minor damage, but I think the damage is already done in terms of his chances for that race win. It is a roller coaster of emotions here in Bathurst. It can only go one way. But which way does it go? That's the fated question. Bear in mind, for the 2 Mustangs up in front to have run into trouble, but Nissan yet to have found themselves at the point of any, is raising some serious alarm bells here for the 394. He knows now those 2 Mustangs, to cover up for their losses, are going to start pushing way harder than they have any means to be able to do at this length of the race. So if he holds his cool here, sticks to his times, doesn't try anything too crazy on the Nissan, there's actually a pretty good chance, just off of what has been experienced in the last 10 minutes, he could find a free position by the end of this race. If he doesn't, nothing lost really. He's still 3rd place and still leads the championship. But I don't believe it. Sorry, I'm just yawning in the middle of that there. I've been awake for quite some time. That has definitely woken me up from out of my sleep. How it has gone between these 2 drivers so often, and for it to have been such a roller coaster of events in the last couple of laps here in Bathurst. Stephen Sutton back into the lead, and now with 6.5 minutes to the line, functionally looking from his point of view at about 4 more laps before the end of this race. For Sutton, this is a case where he could very well be finding himself a race winner in the next couple of minutes. He just has to keep his head low and out of trouble, as Helge Leon actually looks to be getting intercepted by Scallops at this time. So definitely more than meets the eye when it came to the damages on the 45. He's dropped away a significant wad of time now, having to play a lot more hesitantly down through Skyline. And because of that, it's 4.5 seconds between himself and Sutton. It's 2.3 between himself and Scallops. Meanwhile, yellow flags out for, I believe that's the 91, so Zdenek Zulim in trouble, and you can see there the scope of the damages for that Aston Martin. You can see that looks like critical damage for him at this time. It looked almost beached there at one point, but as you can see, as he scrapes his way out through the S's, severe steering damage, the car barely able to stay right. Is he even going to be able to get round Forrest's elbow? No. Zulim determined to see the checkered flag. As you see at the moment, though, this is a painful sight for Aston. It's a painful sight for Zulim as well. He was on for the course of a decent result under his belt once again here in Bathurst, but that car has been ripped asunder. There's got to come a point where he realises the car can no longer be operated to the line. And I think he's just reached that conclusion there. A day to forget then for the Polish talent. Onwards and upwards though for round 6. Just not the way he hoped things would have ended today. So getting back on board with the scope of things from the front of the field here. Stephen Sutton with about 2 more laps, 2 or 3 more laps as it stands before the end of this race. He is not far from finding himself as a race winner in this series. You see at the moment, Mr. Scallops caught up behind Fran Pinto. Getting up and around, we saw there McLaren shifted out of the way for the Nissan. Meanwhile, we saw another yellow flag out. This one for, having a look there, it was the 92. So that was Amizar between Solman and McPhillamy. You can see the scope of the damage there as they head into Skyline. Forced to take the emergency run off, but into the wall. Severe bounce over the rear axle. Fortunate to have avoided the number 12. So as we see here for Sutton, he is getting onto the penultimate lap of this race. Really, there have been so many twists and turns in this race, especially from the scope of that front row. It's been held between these two in what has quite literally been a 2-horse race amongst the Mustangs at the front of the field for the longest time today. I don't think anyone was expecting it to shift so violently in the last quarter hour between these two. Both of them running into trouble over the course of today. We saw that huge spin out earlier for the number 7, and then the number 45 ran into trouble down at Skyline. But as the dust settles here in Bathurst, only one can emerge as the race winner. And by the looks of it at the moment, let's not speak too soon, but by the looks of it, it looks to potentially be the number 7. You see here for Helge Leon. Down through the section of the track that caught him out a few laps ago. Again, I'm quite surprised to see in both of those incidents for both Sutton and Helge Leon for them to have run into an incident of that variety and come out of it with minimal, if any, damages. I think Sutton got off basically with a scratch. For Helge Leon, you can see the damage on the rear diffuser there. but nothing that seems to be outwardly affecting his performance to the point where he would be forced to come into the pits. So catching on board then with Stephen Sutton, things are looking to be very, very interesting for him over the course of the next lap coming. Of course, we're off the end of the penultimate lap here, on towards the final lap in a moment's time. Yellow flag's out in front, but that's for the cars towed to the pit lane. So Przemek Zulin, we saw earlier on, was back into the pits.
Leaders on final lap now.
So on board with Sutton. .9 seconds, the margin between himself and Helge Lien. Can see just there as the camera trails across. That was the gap between himself and Helge Lien. Physically on track, forced to take the runoff though. Stephen Sutton. Oh, and he collides with the wall, so hang on just a moment. There could be an exchange of positions here between the 7 and the 45. Don't go anywhere. We've suddenly found ourselves thrust back in to the fight of first. One tiny knock with the wall. Has that been enough to put the final nail in the coffin here for Sutton's chances of a race win? We see Helge Lien off by 1.4 seconds at this time. Doesn't look like anything too severe happened in the scope of things for Sutton. But I'm sure he is praying for this nightmare to end here in Bathurst and what has been madness throughout on the run down towards the chase. He's not far from the checkered flag, but he has to survive in order to get there. Down through turn 20, 21 and 22. So close to the line now as he makes his way down towards turn 23. Only one more corner left to go. He has braved madness here in the land down under. In a saga of two Mustangs, it could only be one by one. And down towards the line, Stephen Sutton wins in Bathurst. After what was a spectacular fight amongst these two, the saga of two American talents, Helge Lien and Sutton. It's Sutton victorious at round 5. Gives Ford their second race win of the season here in Season 3. One of the most tense finishes to a race I think we've ever seen in this series. Undeniable performance between the pair. An absolute showstopper. Mr. Scallops joins them for the podium. De Samas 4th, Anthony Valorio a triumphant top 5 for Ferrari against the odds here. Luca Tamburini will be, by looks of it, provisionally 6th. Ladislav Mizin was out in front of the number 7, so has to do one more lap, but by looks of it there, with the podium locked out for the 69 for 2nd for Matthias de Munster, Tom Wells coming to the line here for another podium finish with Ginetta, the plucky G55, once again on for a podium. A great result for Wells, 3rd place at the end of today's race with Ginetta. Asahi Ota braving quite the fierce set of conditions in today's race. Puts Aston Martin in the top 5, 4th place for the number 55. The 813 we see here, Luca Tamburini finishing 6th place for Porsche. Survival above all things here in Bathurst. Coming to the line, Felix Kobler being intercepted by Przemek Zulin, looking for the inside. It's contact between the pair on the final lap, all in contention for 5th place in division. And it has all gone horrifically sour. Kobler to the line, and I'm sure there are many words that the rest of the drivers have had to describe this one. I'm not quite sure what to make of that finish between the two. Kobler 5th, Zulin 6th. But not happy. And so, what that gives us at the moment is the scope of things as having headed down towards the line. Vladislav Mizin crossed the line for your GT4 division win with AMG, his 4th win this season. So AMG maintains 100% win rate in GT4. Ford picks up their second this season, and Stephen Sutton picks up his first in Season 3. A very, very controversial race indeed. A lot of drama all throughout from start to finish, from green flag to checkered flag. It has not given us any moment of respite here in Mount Panorama. What a race that's come to be then here at round 5 of the championship. Our next stop is over at Snetterton at round 6 on February 14th. That's next weekend. And then we'll be heading to the final 2 rounds of the championship. Another 90-minute race coming up at the Nürburgring Nordschleife on February 28th. And the Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps on the 7th of March at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Well, that's going to be all from us here on TRTN. Not a lot of time to get prepared for the next and last event of today's broadcast schedule. Coming up not far from now, actually less than an hour from where we're speaking at this time, will be our first coverage of the season for the Competizione Performance League World Series. That comes to you live from Silverstone. Until then, that's all from us here on TRTN. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. Take care. Good night.